Welcome to Bajigur Wedang Ronde. I'm Gary Wiryawan, and today we're gonna talk about 7 of the best Micro Four Thirds lenses that you can buy. In this video, I'm gonna talk about 7 lenses that you need for your Micro Four Thirds camera system to be able to cover general purpose photography and videography. So these lenses will cover things such as portrait, landscape, videography, taking cool B-roll shots, vlogging, travel photography and videography, and many more other photography genre. Let's start with the first lens. This is the Panasonic Lumix 20mm f1.7 Mark II. This is one of my favorite lenses for taking environmental portrait, for travel, for street photography, for everyday walk around stuff, because it is tight but it is still wide enough to get the environment around the subject that you're trying to photograph. The main cool thing about this lens is that it goes down all the way to f1.7, which will help you a lot in low light situation or if you're trying to get a subject isolation with the bokeh. Other cool thing about this lens is how tiny it is. It's very thin. It's actually a pancake lens, so it's supposed to be thin, small, and portable and lightweight. But that doesn't mean that this lens is a bad quality lens. Actually, this is one of the sharpest lenses that you can get for Micro Four Thirds. I would suggest this lens for street photography, for travel photography, for everyday walk around lens, for general purpose photography. You can use this lens for video, but keep in mind that the focus motor is using the older technology, so it might make sounds when you're trying to use the autofocus on this lens. Also, be mindful if you are using Olympus cameras, because this lens will focus slower on the Olympus camera compared to Panasonic cameras. Moving on to the next lens is the Panasonic Leica 15mm f1.7. So the reason why this is one of my favorite lens is because it is very sharp as the 20mm, but it is slightly wider than the 20mm lens. 15mm will get you even more environment than just the subject. It has the aperture ring over here that makes it easy to change aperture, just like old manual camera lenses. It is also relatively compact, small and lightweight, so it is also perfect for travel. I would suggest to use this lens for travel photography, for street photography, and for video, for vlogging, for B-roll. 15mm is pretty wide. It's not really that tight, but it's not also really that wide. So it's pretty much a general purpose lens that you can use for whatever you want. This also happens to be my favorite environmental portrait lens. One thing that you need to keep in mind is that 15mm focal length is very similar to the focal length that you found on your camera on the phone. That means that you have to be really creative when using this lens so that you can make your photograph pop, because otherwise if you photograph with this focal length, it will look similar like if you take it using your phone. But I don't really think that's a negative, because then that means that this lens really forced me to think out of my comfort zone, to try to make something more creative with this lens, so that the photograph that I took with this lens can be differentiated than the one that I took from the phone. Moving on to the next lens is my Olympus 45mm f1.8. The reason why I like this lens is because the focal length 45mm is pretty tight, but it's not the tightest. So you can comfortably use it for tighter portraits, for taking good B-rolls of a video, and just general purpose medium telephoto kind of lens. This lens is also tiny, it's extremely sharp like the other two that I just previously mentioned. The f1.8 is also good in low light like the previous 2 lenses that I already showed you. And with this focal length, it is slightly zoomed in, and that means that you can get even more subject isolation. Okay. Even wide open at f1.8, it is still very sharp, and I really recommend this lens for anything that needs a medium telephoto kind of focal length. Moving on to the next lens, this is my Panasonic 14 to 140mm f3.5 to f5.6. So this is my favorite lens when it comes to travel because it goes from medium wide angle 14mm up to 140mm telephoto focal length. That means this lens is very flexible. You can use it for almost anything. You can use it for vlogging, you can use it for landscape, for portrait, for semi-macro works because this lens focuses relatively close to the subject, but really this lens shines when it comes to travel photography because this can be the only lens that you need for your travel. I've been using this lens for a very long time and I've been very happy with it. In fact, this is one of the first few lenses that I own for the Micro Four Thirds system. The only drawback of this lens is the fact that the aperture is not so big. It's only f3.5 at the wide end and f5.6 at the telephoto end, which means that it doesn't gather as much light as the previous lenses that I showed you. Other negative is that this lens is not the sharpest, but that doesn't mean that this lens is bad. It is still sharp enough for what I need. Now moving on to the next lens. This is one of my favorite as well. This is the Olympus 75mm f1.8. Now this lens, although it doesn't have the Pro series name on it, it is one of the sharpest Micro Four Thirds lens that you can get. And with the 75mm focal length, it even gives you more bokeh than the other lenses. Combining the 75mm focal length with the f1.8 aperture, it will give you the most bokeh. However, the focal length is quite long, 75mm. It's not really that flexible. You can use it definitely for portrait, for headshot, for things like that, but it's not really the most flexible lens. But still, if you have the opportunity to use this lens correctly, then it will give you the most perfect result every time. Moving on to the next lens, this is the Panasonic 12 to 35mm f2.8. There is a newer version of this lens that is slightly sharper than this lens, and it has better stabilization when coupled with the correct camera bodies. But other than that, the new and the older version of this lens are basically the same. This lens has the focal length of 12mm to 35mm, which goes from wide to medium telephoto. It is a very flexible lens, and this is really good for traveling, for landscape, for portrait, for video, for vlogging, for anything basically that doesn't require you long telephoto lens. It is sharp, it has the f2.8 aperture, which means it gathers more light compared to the normal kit lens that has f3.5 or f5.6. If I have to take only one lens when it comes to traveling, usually I will prefer this lens over any other lens that I have. This lens is also perfect for camera bodies that doesn't have the built-in sensor stabilization because the optical stabilization on this lens is excellent and the sharpness is good enough for a zoom lens. Last but not least, this is my absolute favorite lens. Unfortunately, I cannot show it to you right now because I'm using the lens right now. This is the lens that's recording me right now. It's the Laowa 7.5mm f2 lens. I've been using this lens extensively for landscape photography, for travel photography, for astrophotography, as well as for vlogging. And this is sort of a rare breed when it comes to Micro Four Thirds lens because it is still small, it has a very large aperture, and it's a wide angle lens. It's not a fisheye lens, it's a proper rectilinear wide angle lens. When it's coupled with my Panasonic G85 camera, which has the built-in sensor stabilization, it is very stable and I can comfortably use it for vlogging. The lens is sharp, it's very good, it's lightweight, it's easy to carry around, it's good for traveling, it's good for low light situations. The only drawback of this lens is the fact that it doesn't have autofocus, so you have to manually rotate the focus ring to get the perfect focus. But that isn't really a problem because it's a very wide lens, so you can have more depth of field even at large apertures such as f2. So yes, those are the 7 Micro Four Thirds lenses that I can highly recommend to you right now. These lenses will undoubtedly help you to unleash your creativity and help you to make the best photo or video possible. Before I end the video, yes, I am aware that there are newer lenses for Micro Four Thirds that is so much better than these lenses that I just showed you. However, in my opinion, the newer Micro Four Thirds lenses are big and they are expensive. The reason why I chose these 7 lenses is because they are not terribly expensive and is still within the budget for most Micro Four Thirds user, and they are still very good quality, so you can depend on them to make the best possible photo or video that you need. I hope this video has been useful and inspiring for you. If you have any of these lenses, please let me know in the comments below which one is your most favorite. If you don't have one yet, please let me know in the comments below which one are you most interested to use in the near future. If you have any question regarding about this lens, please let me know in the comments below and I'll try my best to answer any questions. Please also support my channel by liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Thank you for watching and goodbye.